this is Mary Jo Faustgen. Today I bring you a new recording on seasonal affective disorder, or S.A.D as it's well known. And so today we're going to talk hopefully about reframing your mind, retraining your body. And so what I've done is just try to give you some ideas about changing your outlook, looking out at the gray clouds and finding the silver linings. I want you to know that I've learned a lot as I've done the research on this particular project. And I've taken my notes from not only the Mayo Clinic, which I always like to do, but also from the Harvard Medical School, Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine, neurologists from also the director of Vanderbilt University Division of Sleep, as well as chief of the Division of Sleep and Circadian Disorders at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and my favorite textbook of all time, Neuroscience. And this is from when I took my Coursera course online from Dr. Lynn White. And I would highly recommend it if you're interested in all of that neuroscience piece. So the topics we're going to talk about in this kind of disorder that has to do with feeling so down and so low, oftentimes. We're going to talk about definitions and coding, the symptoms and risk factors, as well as the causative factors. We're going to learn about the body's biological clock and circadian rhythms, and some things in there that some of us may not know, as well as some tips and treatments for these things. So if you're feeling kind of like you're in the holiday slump, like I kind of am in the middle of January right now, after the holiday chaos, you know, we have all these preparations and the decorations and the shopping and the entertaining and the food, and what we're left with after the holidays is oftentimes the clutter of all kinds of, you know, not only the wrapping paper, but the boxes. I don't know how many boxes we've got right now. And, you know, you look at the debt because maybe you've overspent, and you look at the regret because maybe you've overeaten. And then you look outside and you see only bare brown trees, and you see the ice, and you're trying not to slip on the ice, and you see the dirty snow. So in Minnesota here, you know, we have some things that we have to overcome as we deal with the winter. Have you also noticed too that sometimes as the seasons change, you feel a change in your mood, and that's your affect. This is what seasonal affective disorder is. It's that change in your mood due to the seasonal change. And of course, we know about the one that happens in autumn through winter, and it resolves in the spring. But I also found out that there's one that happens in the spring, and it goes through the summer. Both of these may be mild or severe, and they have different types of symptoms. So the one from autumn through winter, which is called winter depression or winter S.A.D, you feel tired, you feel like you just have very little interest in things, you just kind of have lost your hope. Some people even feel like they don't want to live anymore. And they're sleeping all the time, they're overeating, especially those carbs that are so tempting, and they're gaining weight, and it just gets so depressing. The one in spring, though, through summer, the summer depression, is totally different because you can actually get more agitated and anxious and irritable, and you have a poor appetite, and you're losing weight, so your body's kind of in hyperdrive, and you have a hard time actually sleeping. So a little bit different, so quite a bit different actually in the symptoms. Now the coding you may or may not be interested in, but I thought I'd throw it in anyway. Our wonderful DSM-5 book that we go by, as well as the ICD-10 coding for billing. If you go to a therapist or you go to a doctor, they have to use these codes. And you might think that, you know, it would just say seasonal affective disorder, but it does not, that isn't in our coding system right now. So you might get diagnosed with either a depressive disorder unspecified or something that's called persistent affective disorder. And those have different codes. Or if it's more severe, it might be a major depressive disorder. If it is a major change from the way you have acted and your mood from before, it may be a major depressive disorder. So depending on where you go and what that person's experience is, you may get coded and diagnosed with something different. Now, the risk factors for S.A.D, if you have a bipolar disorder, or if you have a family history of S.A.D, or if you've had major depression, these are all risk factors that can lead to continued problems with seasonal affective disorder. If you've been diagnosed with a low vitamin D level, that's an important piece, because that vitamin D is produced in the skin when you're exposed to sunlight. And then if you live in a place that's far away from the equator, isn't that interesting? Because you've got decreased sunlight in the winter and, of course, longer summer days. Well, you may not know what that has to do with, but it's got to do with things that we're going to talk about in a minute. And the causes of S.A.D, they found that when there's decreased sunlight in the autumn and the winter, it's not only causing a disruption in serotonin, but a disruption in the internal circadian rhythm that people have. And once that happens, there is oftentimes an imbalance in the melatonin level. The melatonin, if you don't know, is a neurohormone that is definitely something that helps us to sleep. And it goes in a cycle, as we're going to see in just a second. So our light and mood is determined by our body's biological clock. So as sunlight or any light hits our eyes, there is a certain type of receptor in the eye that picks that up. And it's not the rods and cones that we normally hear about, but it's called a retinal ganglion cell. And that particular cell has a direct pathway to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus, the SCN, and that is well known to be the body's biological clock. It has to do with the autonomic nervous system, and it regulates the body's internal temperature, it regulates blood pressure, it regulates so many internal body functions. And there's also, as you can see here in the diagram, it's very close to the purple area right in the middle. It kind of looks like a C, and that's the limbic area of the brain. That's the area that has to do with emotions and mood. And so, of course, there are connections into the limbic system, but it also has definite connections, which are not shown here, that go into the prefrontal cortex, which is where we have executive functions and those decision making and things like that oftentimes become difficult in depression. And then I would like to talk now about human circadian rhythms. Very interesting. The circadian comes from the Latin circa, which is approximate, and dian is from dies, which is Latin for days. So approximately a 24-hour cycle is what our day is internally, okay? And the first mention of human circadian rhythms was in about the 13th century in Chinese medical texts. Before that, they had noticed that there were animals that had a normal rhythm to their body. And there's been a lot of research with animals, even fruit flies and bees and things like that, about their rhythms. And so many animals have an internal rhythm. This one is about our human one. And if you follow along with me at the very bottom here, it starts at midnight. And our deepest sleep occurs around 2 to 4 a.m., which is where the peak of melatonin, our endogenous melatonin, is taking place. And then around 6 a.m. is when oftentimes the light starts, the sunlight starts, and then our body system starts to wake up. Around solar noon, 12 o'clock, where the sun is at its highest, is a very interesting and important time for us to look at. And then as we keep going clockwise here, around 15:30, it says, which is military time, of course, it says about 3:30 we have our fastest reaction time. Well, I'm not sure if I'm actually with my fastest reaction time at that point. I think I've actually noticed I have kind of a slump, so maybe my circadian rhythm is just a little bit off. Then you follow down to about 1800, which is 6 o'clock. And oftentimes the sunlight is starting to cut back at that point. But notice oftentimes our blood pressure is still high and our body temperature is still high. Melatonin isn't starting to be secreted until 2100, which is about 9 o'clock. So if you take a melatonin supplement, that's why they usually suggest that, say if you plan on sleeping around 10 or 11 o'clock, you start adding melatonin to your system about 2 hours before. It's very interesting, our body's biological clock. So some of us may be off a little bit from that, and there may be reasons why we're off a little bit. We're going to talk about that. We're talking here about the circadian rhythms that we just talked about and how it's related to daylight savings time and standard time. Now, standard time follows a natural circadian rhythm of the body. And so that is in sync with solar noon and the solar day. And we've evolved to align with the sunrise, the sunset, and the 24-hour day for centuries. And then somebody started daylight savings time, and I started researching that. I found out that daylight savings time was actually started in Germany around the time of the war. There about 1916, and they were trying to save energy and probably fuel at the same time. It didn't get to the United States till about 1918, and then it was abolished after the war. But somewhere in the 1900s, it started up again. What we found as we've studied daylight savings time is that there can be a circadian misalignment where the internal clock of our bodies falls out of sync with the solar clock. So solar noon and the solar day. So in March, when we spring ahead and daylight savings time begins, we wake up in the dark, longer time of sunlight during the day, which I kind of like because I can spend more time outside in my garden, get more done. But the solar clock doesn't change. Solar noon doesn't change. But our internal body is off from the sunlight that we're seeing. And this can disrupt the normal sleep patterns because we're not ready to sleep when the sun goes down, especially, in December when it starts getting dark around 4:30. I'm not ready to sleep at 4:30, okay? And your clock will get you up earlier in the winter time as well. So this all contributes to spring through summer S.A.D. You get more agitated, you get awake more, you are awake longer. And what they found actually by studying this through decades of time is that we're experiencing more heart attacks, more strokes, and more car accidents right around the time that we switch to daylight savings time. And if we had year-round daylight savings time, they think that we would have a greater chance of the winter S.A.D, which would probably cause an increased risk of sleep loss, more chance of diabetes, more obesity, more heart disease, more cancers. And so what they found is that, with lots of research over time, daylight savings time may not be a good thing for our bodies. And so let's talk for a minute about what to do if you found that you do have either the winter or the summer type of S.A.D. Well, there's phototherapy if you're missing the sun, if you haven't got enough sun in the winter. And as I looked into this, the people from Harvard Medical School helped me out here with the fact that artificial light boxes should emit around 10,000 lux, which is a measure of light intensity. But this isn't regulated, so they recommend going to, excuse me, a certain website for the Center for Environment Therapeutics, CET.org, so that you can find out what they recommend for regulation for that. And they recommend about 30 minutes each morning as soon as you wake up. And you try to keep your eyes open, but not to stare at the light, because that may not be good for you right now. But they warn people who have bipolar disorder or severe depression, it may not be good for you to do that. It may not be good for you to do the phototherapy. And then there's psychotherapy, which of course I am well aware of. Oftentimes I do cognitive behavioral therapy. And in cognitive therapy, we do working on changing your cognitions, your thoughts, to more coping thoughts. And being willing to change your behavior as well. But sometimes people kind of don't necessarily want to change their behavior. It takes a little bit of motivation to do that. And so sometimes we have to try lots of different things to help yourself to see what works for you, because you're a unique individual. And what works for you may not work for somebody else. What works for somebody else may not work for you. So we got to find what works for you. The doctor can help you with possible antidepressants that you might need, and testing your vitamin D level to see if you do need supplements for vitamin D3. Very important. So you can check with your doctor about that. But there's some things that we can talk about here that I would like to kind of share with you. So what makes you happy? What fills you with joy? So I've listed a few things: talking with a friend, having a party, cuddling with a partner. And I just especially like cuddling on the couch with a blanket and something warm to drink. Good cup of coffee maybe, but that might give you a little bit too much caffeine if you're a little bit overly agitated. But maybe a good book or a good movie, maybe getting a new outfit, having a new experience, going to a museum, going to a play, something that you haven't experienced before, is something that oftentimes people want to do. And I always recommend that people have some bright lights around. So don't always fill yourself with, a dark room, especially if you tend to isolate more. I love the holiday lights, and I especially like the softer, clear lights, the Christmas lights that people have, because you can have those out all year long. And those holiday lights, sometimes when I look at them, I just smile because they make me feel good. Maybe a candle lit up with some wonderful aroma would make you feel good. Your favorite music or food or movie. Sometimes helping somebody else, knowing that somebody else might need a helping hand, or they might need an encouraging word. And above all, remembering a gratitude list, because there's so many things to be grateful for. Try not to go to bed before you find at least 3 things to be grateful for that day or for your life. And I thought of some winter coping thoughts, because as you look out at those brown trees and the dirty snow, you might want to kind of give yourself a different way of looking at winter. Okay, so even if it's dreary and gray, I know that the sun is out there somewhere. It's there behind the clouds. It may be cold outside, but at least I have heat inside. Spring will come. I love spring. New buds on the trees, everything's greening up, and there's new flowers and there's more sunshine. And especially after a new snowfall, that we've had some beautiful ones recently in Minnesota. It's really beautiful outside. It looks like a winter wonderland. I've had people tell me that all the time. I have relatives in Virginia, and They actually sometimes envy us in Minnesota because we have this wonderful landscape in the winter, at least until it gets to be dirty snow. And for those who are winter enthusiasts, if you love to ski, snowboard, skate, ice fish, go sledding, what do you like to do outside? There can be some enjoyment outside in the winter. And maybe you can just tell yourself, I'm going to do something to cheer myself up. I'm going to bundle myself up with my favorite blanket, my favorite little drink, and I'm going to read because I haven't been able to read anything recently because I've been so busy with the holidays. Okay. Or I've been wanting, little typo here, I've been wanting to get to that project I've been putting off. Now's my chance. Now's my chance. And then, how about some art and color therapy? Do you like to draw? Do you like to paint? Are you a good painter? I have relatives on both sides of my family that are wonderful painters, and they can take a scene, either that they see outside or that they want to copy, and they do just a beautiful job of doing that. I did not get those genes from my relatives, and I'm rather envious of people who can do that. If you can express yourself on canvas or on paper, that's such a skill, and you can use art and color to not only express yourself, but to give enjoyment to other people. Or maybe, you know, like me, all you can do is change the color in your walls. Well, go to it. You know, winter is a time where you're kind of stuck inside, and maybe you can enjoy that time by enlightening your color scheme. Maybe you can change just your pillows to a different color. Maybe you can change the rugs on your floors. So many different changes we can make to our environment inside that can make us feel better. And can you kind of start some new hobbies? Learn something new. Right now, mine is starting to learn about antiques, porcelains, and antique jewelry and things like that. Or maybe you can take a class, keep yourself active, enrich your brain and your body power, exercise for those endorphins. What have you been putting off? You know, there's oftentimes I put off those special winter projects until after the holidays. And so I start cleaning my spice area in my cabinets, or I clean my cabinets, or I get out things that I haven't seen for a long time in my closets or my storage area. And I look at what I've got. Sometimes I've forgotten what I've gotten and need to kind of refresh my memory about that. Can you reorganize things? Can you look at your finances? Now is a good time in the new year to look at, you know, can I maybe look at buying some mutual funds or some I bonds or double E bonds, or what can I do? Can you maybe get out an old puzzle that has been fun to do? I know people who get into repairs in the wintertime or do more sewing. And right now, as I said, I'm getting into antiques. And so I'm going to get all my antiques that I've gotten from my relatives from many years ago. And I'm going to try to get them appraised, because once spring starts, I'm not going to have time once I'm out in the garden. And then what I call sensational therapy, using your five senses to kind of enlighten and enliven your experience of life. Maybe aromatherapy, those essential oils, get those out in the wintertime so that you can just smell that aroma, and, you know, it kind of makes you feel better as you smell those wonderful aromas. Visual therapy, get some new wall art, or go visit a museum. Minneapolis Institute of Arts is open with all kinds of things in the winter. Or just looking at snow-covered mountains or waterfalls. They just kind of make me feel good. And then there's gustatory therapy, which is, you know, what can you do to enliven your taste buds? So baking cookies or pies or gourmet foods, or adding the aromatherapy and the gustatory therapy when you're baking breads just fills the whole place. And then when you start tasting them, of course, then you get those taste buds going. Touch therapy, maybe you just need a massage to relax those tense muscles after the holidays. Or maybe just give your partner some extra hugs and kisses, or maybe a new sexual experience. And then there's audio therapy, podcasts, audiobooks, and conferences. So what can you do to enliven your senses at this time of, things that kind of look gray outside? And can you do an early morning perk up where you take an early morning walk, which actually is similar to light therapy? On a bright sunny day, you can get as much as 50,000 lux, which is equivalent to the light therapy that you're getting, or almost equivalent to that. A gray day is about 10,000 lux, so even that gives you some sunlight. Or I love this quote from professor at Harvard. Strolling outdoors soon after sunrise, even on a cloudy day, provides almost the same amount of light exposure as a light box. So give yourself that wonderful experience of getting up early and seeing the sunrise. A few more hints. Smile to release your endorphins. And that's also a gift to give other people. Exercise to release your endorphins. Those are those positive chemicals that are inside your body. You just got to release them. And then if you set positive and measurable goals, you're releasing another positive hormone, the dopamine. Maybe you want to lose weight after the holidays. Maybe you want to exercise more. Maybe you want to stay in touch with people more or become a more patient person. These are all good things to do to help your body, to help your mood. And so as I've come to realize, there's so many things that we can do to see the blue sky, to see past the dark clouds, to see the sun, even when you may not see it on a gray day, to be able to enliven and enlighten your spirit. So I'm hoping that this can help you as you go forward. Thank you for joining me, and please join me for other webinars in the future. Take care and stay healthy.